Right. And hello. Hello, all my wild darlings. Hello, my tiny but fierce army. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining me. It is 1 minute after 7 p.m. here in California. I'm Tad. Still Tad. Plan on continuing to be Tad for a while. You may hear the noises of feline protest in the background. Nobody is actually being mean to them. They think people are being mean to them, but they're not. Apparently, my daughter informs me they've run out of wet food, which I was not aware of, and so they're complaining. They have plenty of dry food, but of course, cats being cats, that is not what they wanted. Anyway, so I'm just mentioning this to you. So if you hear them walking around in the background complaining, it's not because we're doing anything mean to them, or not particularly mean anyway. So hi, good to see you. I am sort of just kind of finding my footing again. I did an Ask Me Anything, an AMA on Reddit today, which was lovely, but I did not expect to have continuous stuff to answer for close to 4 hours. And I swear to God, I typed what would have been several chapters worth of actual writing today. Unfortunately, none of it counts towards my novel writing page count, but and I was happy to do it and enjoyed it. But it was a lot of writing. Part of this, of course, is nobody's fault but my own, because I tend to answer at length. But anyway, so I haven't gotten anything else done today but that. I got up, wrestled with various things that had to be wrestled with, did the AMA, collapsed and had a nap and got back up again in time to sort of get ready for this and maneuver my way through various complications. There are always complications, always complications. Last night when I was starting the Martian Chronicles, I had planned ahead, done everything, had downloaded a copy onto my Kindle account so that I could read it right off the screen, et cetera, et cetera. Fortunately for me, last night I went down about half an hour, 40 minutes early just to kind of check things and tried to open up the Kindle thing, and it suddenly informed me, no, that's the old Kindle account. You need it. You need a new one because blah, 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 the usual nonsense. So then, of course, I had to spend 35, 40 minutes trying to figure out what my old passwords were and how to download a new Kindle and hoping that it would come up properly so that I had access, and et cetera, et cetera. It's always something, as a famous American comedy character, Rosanna used to say. That was one of Gilda Radner's characters on the original Saturday Night Live. It's always something. And it is indeed always something. So here I am. There you are. I am going to be continuing with the Martian Chronicles tonight. I will probably not spend as much time talking about book stuff as I did last night before I start, not just because I hate to redo things and waste space, time, whatever you want to call it, when this stuff is all recorded and is thus available, but also because I was spending a long time talking about a particular blind alley or complicated cul-de-sac in the new book that was frustrating me at the moment. And it's still frustrating me because I haven't done anything since then, but I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. If you're interested, please just listen to last night's, which, if you haven't, is worthwhile listening to anyway, just to get the first story in the Martian Chronicles. So I'm not going to go into that. I will just briefly check in with all the other stuff since I was gone for a couple of weeks, and this is my first Sunday evening reading in 3 weeks. And everything fine. We're all fine. The office is still a ghastly mess, as you can see, but that's one of the things next on my list of things to deal with. I will be doing other kinds of official type stuff, and I will let you know as those happen. But other than that, nothing much to report. Working on the Splintered Sun, going through the typical frustrations in a first draft of realizing I'm not happy with what this bit's doing here. So I'm working on that. Deborah, wife and partner, she's fine. All the kids are fine as far as we know. The pet's doing okay, all things considered. I spend a part of every morning wrestling Walter into a coat now. Walter, of course, the tiny, tiny Chihuahua. There will be a letter going out to the mailing list before too long, which will detail some of my travails with various pets and other distractions, because I find it slightly amusing, and it's better than weeping when you're trying to work and you can't because things keep coming up. You know, you got to consider that lemons and try to make some lemonade out of them anyway. So let me check in briefly and see if any of the dangerous gang are here. And let me see. So I see Beth. That's Beth Kelleher. Angie is here. Hello, Angie. Melissa. Hello, Melissa. A pleasure. Winter. Good to see you. Ron, of course. Ron the faithful. Ron the strong. Ron the brave. Dale. My old friend from way back when. Good to see you, Dale. Claudia is here. Hello. Ivan. Another old friend from way back when. Way back even whener. Ivan. Ivan and I go back to high school era. If anything, maybe even slightly earlier. I don't remember if we first met junior high or in high school, but we go way back. Emily, hello, Emily. Good to see you. Emily and I had a really good conversation on her YouTube thing that we did the other night. So I hope you had a chance to check that out if you were interested. Tracy McClatchy, hello, Tracy. Barban is here. Kelly is here. Medardo is here. Susan Shamblin is here. Stephanie Gelder. Oh, that's a new name. Hi, Stephanie. Good to have you with us. And Christy is here, too. That's Christy Sanders. So that is, why didn't the talented Deb crochet Walter a coat, Angie asks. Deborah certainly could have crocheted Walter a coat. I just wanted something cheap that when he drags it through the pee, yeah, we haven't ruined anything important. That's basically it. So anyway, but no, it was funny. The first coat I got for Walter, which still amuses me to this day. We've tried it in the past. It's always difficult because he's so tiny. And I told this story last night, but so I have to find, first of all, ones that have things like extra small, because honest to God, his body is about that big around. And he's all leg. So he's 4 pounds and half of that is legs. He's skinny as heck. He's what's called a deer head Chihuahua. And he's also largely senile, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, so the first coat that I got for him was very heavy duty once it got to me. And it stuck way out in the back. And it was quite, it was kind of curved at the top. But you couldn't even get it to fasten on him properly because he was too small for the straps, really. So he had this huge kind of plated shield on his back that stuck out quite a ways so that he looked like some kind of a beetle or something, and literally like a turtle or a beetle. If he fell over on his back, he couldn't get up. So that's why I had to get a different kind of coat for him, something much softer and more flexible, because it was just pathetic to see him get toppled over on the floor and then lie there going, help. Anyway, so that's the basic facts here. Everybody okay? Me working on the splintered sun, albeit at the moment going through certain stresses, but that's very much part of the process, especially at the first draft stage, where you're still saying, I don't know, does this work? Does this work? Am I giving proper attention to this part? All those kinds of things. And as I said, this was I've said this before anyway, this was a slightly unusual story in the sense that kind of since I was starting from scratch with it. I mean, it is an Ostenard story, but it's like Brothers of the Wind and stuff. It's different. It's not just another novel in that series. It's a slightly different approach. So I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I want to write it, literally. How do I want to tell the story, in what form, what kind of structure, which characters get attention, which characters are we seeing the world through, et cetera, et cetera. So it's only normal that there will be a certain amount of struggling here and there, trying to figure things out. Okay, so anything else that I wanted to talk about? No, I will be doing a few more, because we're in book publication season. I will be doing a few more events here and there, interviews, etc. I may moonlight as a shopping mall Santa, whatever I can do to get the word about my book out there. Ho, 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 buy my book. And I will, of course, as always, continue to post those either here on Facebook or on Blue Sky. Deb will post them on what used to be called Twitter, and I will not use the new name because it irritates me. Anyway, so that, I think, is the basic sum of what's going on. As always, I am very grateful to have you here with me, and I think I may just plunge in. Those of you who haven't had a chance to listen to last night's, let me just give you a brief précis on why the Martian Chronicles. And interestingly enough, while I was doing the AMA on Reddit today, several people were asking me about influences and about the Scythi and where they come from and why they look the way they do, you know, with the golden skin and the yellow eyes and the whole bit and all kinds of things. And as I told people then, and I have said many times in the past, I honestly think that Bradbury's Martians were more of an influence on the Scythi than any elves in any fantasy novel, even including Tolkien's elves. And so that's one reason why the Martian Chronicles is a significant book for me. It got me at an early age, too. I think I probably read it when I was maybe 10 or so. The other thing about the Martian Chronicles is I've always loved Bradbury because of the exuberance of his language, his writing. Like some other similar writers like Tom Robbins, there are times when I say, well, that might be a little wordy, too wordy even for me. But by and large, I love it. I love the expansiveness. I love the ambition, the attempt to turn everything into a form of prose poetry. I love that. And while I am a little more restrained myself, it's not because I don't enjoy that. And so, especially again, if you want to see influences on the Dragonbone Chair, you know, there's the Gormenghast books by Mervyn Peake. There's the Once and Future King, of which we just read the first portion by T.H. White. And there's Bradbury's Martian Chronicles. And you will see more of why, I'm sure, as we go along. But a great deal of it. And one of the areas where it does intersect with Tolkien's version, especially Tolkien's version of the elves, is in the pathos, in the sense of loss, in the and as you will see as we read through the stories, it becomes increasingly clear as the humans become dominant, at least for a while, and the Martians begin to fade into the background. There's a tremendous sense of loss that Bradbury's writing about, and a tremendous sense of how we humans sometimes obliterate entire cultures without realizing or without caring. So this obviously is thematically very relevant to the Ostenard books. Well, probably to all my stuff, but especially to the Ostenard stuff and to the position of the non-human races in those books. So that's another big reason, that feeling of loss and decline and all that stuff that runs through the Martian Chronicles. You won't see it so much in tonight's story, obviously, because this is the very early part of the book, the stories where humans are first coming to Mars and Martians are still living there. But it will become clearer as the stories go on. Anyway, so I think that's basically what I wanted to say about the Martian Chronicles, other than, I mean, it's hard to sift out all the influences because it's one of those things that, like The Wind in the Willows or The Lord of the Rings itself, that I read early enough that they became a part of how I think, and therefore harder to pick out in terms of like, oh yeah, I definitely was inspired by that particular idea. Because as most of you probably already know, the things that we read, at least those of us who are readers, the things that we read are how or what we use to build our minds, our imaginations, our sense of right and wrong, and all that stuff. And if they get into you early enough, you have to really work to find all the integuments, to find all the ways they connect to various parts of your personality. And for me, it's not just my personality, but obviously it's how I express myself in my craft as well. So, that all said, let me see if there's anybody else I should check in and say hello to who might have arrived and be feeling lone and lorn, just in case. Yes, I see a few other. I see Janice Ann Hampson has shown up. Hello, Janice. Nice to have you. And Arlen Apilado Motzinger. Another complicated name that is not immediately obvious in terms of its pronunciation. You can always, by the way, feel free to correct me or to let me know here on Facebook if I am mispronouncing things, okay? Because I do like to know. Anyway, and Janice, thank you very, very much for those. This is Janice Ann Hampson I'm talking to, who's posted a thing. So thank you very, very much for your kind comment. I appreciate it. And I'm very glad to know it, because that's one of the reasons that I write, is to be able to interact with other people and their lives, and hopefully sometimes bring them something reassuring or pleasurable or whatever. So it's all good, and I always like being told that my books have had an effect or a use even for people. So now, having checked in, I think I am going to open up the book again. Here we go. Again, for those of you who don't know, or not again, but tonight for the first time, here just as a clue as to what's going on. These stories were originally written separately. A publisher approached Bradbury and said, these could be made into put sequentially and made into kind of a novel, a collection novel, as it were. And so Bradbury wrote some little interstitial pieces, of which the first thing we read tonight, which is probably like a page long, or two at the most. So Bradbury wrote interstitial pieces to kind of thread these things together like beads on a necklace. So the first thing we're going to read is one of those interstitial pieces, and then we will read the main story that this is about. One other thing is that the characters that are Martians in the first story, not the interstitial piece, but the story, all have names that are essentially three consonants. And I'm not sure how I'm going to pronounce them yet, but I'm going to just, three of the same consonants, like T or Y or whatever. So I'm just going to figure out what I'm doing and just try and do it the same all the time. But the idea is not, I think, that how they're pronounced means anything, because they are supposed to just indicate these are not Earth names. These are the names that these Martians have. Last thing. Mars, of course, as Bradbury himself said in his introduction, Mars is not the scientific Mars. Mars is an idea. Mars is an effect. Mars is a worldview. Mars is a dark mirror of America and the world we live in. So, yes, as he says himself, people couldn't breathe on Mars without special equipment, et cetera, et cetera. We all know that. That's not the Mars that this is about. So anyway. Okay. From the Martian Chronicles, from the interstitial section that is labeled August 2030, the summer night. In the stone galleries, the people were gathered in clusters and groups, filtering up into the shadows among the blue hills. A soft evening light shone over them from the stars and the luminous double moons of Mars. Beyond the marble amphitheater, in darkness and distances, lay little towns and villas. Pools of silver water stood motionless, and canals glittered from horizon to horizon. It was an evening in summer upon the placid and temperate planet Mars. Up and down green wine canals, boats as delicate as bronze flowers drifted. In the long and endless dwellings that curved like tranquil snakes across the hills, lovers lay idly whispering in cool night beds. The last children ran in torchlit alleys, gold spiders in their hands, throwing out films of web. Here or there, a late supper was prepared in tables where lava bubbled silvery and hushed. In the amphitheaters of 100 towns on the night side of Mars, the brown Martian people with gold coin eyes were leisurely met to fix their attention upon stages where musicians made a serene music flow up like blossom scent on the still air. Upon one stage, a woman sang. The audience stirred. She stopped singing. She put her hand to her throat. She nodded to the musicians, and they began again. The musicians played, and she sang, and this time the audience sighed and sat forward. A few of the men stood up in surprise, and a winter chill moved through the amphitheater, for it was an odd and a frightening and a strange song this woman sang. She tried to stop the words from coming out of her lips, but the words were these: "She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes." The singer clasped her hands to her mouth. She stood bewildered. "What words are those?" asked the musicians. "What song is that? What language is that?" And when they blew again upon their golden horns, the strange music came forth and passed slowly over the audience, which now talked aloud and stood up. "What's wrong with you?" the musicians asked each other. "What tune is that you played?" "What tune did you play?" The woman wept and ran from the stage, and the audience moved out of the amphitheater. And all around the nervous towns of Mars, a similar thing happened. A coldness had come, like white snow falling on the air. In the black alleys under the torches, the children sang, "And when she got there, the cupboard was bare, and so her poor dog had none." "Children," voices cried, "what was that rhyme? Where did you learn it?" "We just thought of it all of a sudden. It's just words we don't understand." Doors slammed. The streets were deserted. Above the blue hills, a green star rose. All over the night side of Mars, lovers awoke to listen to their loved ones who lay humming in the darkness. What is that tune? And in 1,000 villas, in the middle of the night, women awoke screaming. They had to be soothed while the tears ran down their faces. There, sleep. What's wrong, a dream? Something terrible will happen in the morning." "Nothing can happen. All is well with us." A hysterical sobbing. "It is coming nearer and nearer and nearer. Nothing can happen to us. What could? Sleep now, sleep." It was quiet in the deep morning of Mars, as quiet as a cool and black well, with stars shining in the canal waters, and, breathing in every room, the children curled with their spiders and closed hands, the lovers arm in arm, the moons gone, the torches cold, the stone amphitheaters deserted. The only sound just before dawn was a night watchman, far away down a lonely street, walking along in the darkness, humming a very strange song. August 2030. The Earthmen. Whoever was knocking at the door didn't want to stop. Mrs. Pt.2 threw the door open. "Well? You speak English?" The man standing there was astounded. "I speak what I speak," she said. "It's wonderful English." The man was in uniform. There were 3 men with him in a great hurry, all smiling, all dirty. "What do you want?" demanded Mrs. Tt. "You are a Martian." The man smiled. The word is not familiar to you, certainly. It's an Earth expression." He nodded at his men. "We are from Earth. I'm Captain Williams. We've landed on Mars within the hour. Here we are, the 2nd expedition. There was a 1st expedition, but we don't know what happened to it. But here we are anyway, and you are the first Martian we've met." "Martian?" Her eyebrows went up. "What I mean to say is you live on the 4th planet from the sun, correct?" "Elementary," she snapped, eyeing them. "And we He pressed his chubby pink hand to his chest. "We are from Earth. Right, men?" "Right, sir," a chorus. "This is the planet Tyr," she said, "if you want to use the proper name." "Tyr, Tyr," the captain laughed exhaustedly. "What a fine name, but, my good woman, how is it you speak such perfect English?" "I'm not speaking, I'm thinking," she said. "Telepathy. Good day." And she slammed the door. A moment later, there was that dreadful man knocking again. She whipped the door open. What now? She wondered. The man was still there, trying to smile, looking bewildered. He put out his hands. I don't think you understand." "What?" she snapped. The man gazed at her in surprise. "We're from Earth?" "I haven't time," she said. "I've got a lot of cooking today, and there's cleaning and sewing and all. You evidently wish to see Mr. T.T.T. He's upstairs in his study." "Yes," said the Earthman, confusedly, blinking. "By all means, let us see Mr. T.T.T. He's busy." She slammed the door again. This time, the knock on the door was most impertinently loud. "See here!" cried the man when the door was thrust open again. He jumped in as if to surprise her. "This is no way to treat visitors." "All over my clean floor," she cried. "Mud! Get out! If you come in my house, wash your boots first." The man looked in dismay at his muddy boots. "This," he said, "is no time for trivialities. I think we should be celebrating." He looked at her for a long time, as if looking might make her understand. "If you've made my crystal buns fall in the oven," she exclaimed, "I'll hit you with a piece of wood." She peered into a little hot oven. She came back, red, steamy-faced. Her eyes were sharp yellow, her skin was soft brown. She was thin and quick as an insect. Her voice was metallic and sharp. "Wait here. I'll see if I can let you have a moment with Mr. T.T.T. What was your business?" The man swore luridly, as if she'd hit his hand with a hammer. "Tell him we're from Earth, and it's never been done before." "What hasn't?" She put her brown hand up. "Never mind. I'll be back." The sound of her feet fluttered through the stone house. Outside, the immense blue Martian sky was hot and still as a warm, deep sea water. The Martian desert lay broiling like a prehistoric mud pot, waves of heat rising and shimmering. There was a small rocket ship reclining upon a hilltop nearby. Large footprints came from the rocket to the door of this stone house. Now there was a sound of quarreling voices upstairs. The men within the door stared at one another, shifting on their boots, twiddling their fingers and holding on to their hip belts. A man's voice shouted upstairs. The woman's voice replied. After 15 minutes, the Earthmen began walking in and out the kitchen door with nothing to do. "Cigarette?" said one of the men. Somebody got out a pack and they lit up. They puffed slow streams of pale white smoke. They adjusted their uniforms, fixed their collars. The voices upstairs continued to mutter and chant. The leader of the men looked at his watch. 25 minutes, he said. "I wonder what they're up to there." He went to a window and looked out. "Hot day," said one of the men. "Yeah," said someone else in the slow, warm time of early afternoon. The voices had faded to a murmur now, and were silent. There was not a sound in the house. All the men could hear was their own breathing. An hour of silence passed. "I hope we didn't cause any trouble," said the captain. He went and peered into the living room. Mrs. T.T.T. was there, watering some flowers that grew in the center of the room. "I knew I had forgotten something," she said when she saw the captain. She walked out to the kitchen. "I'm sorry," She handed him a slip of paper. Mr. T.T.T. is much too busy. She turned to her cooking. Anyway, it's not Mr. T.T.T. you want to see. It's Mr. A.A.A. Take that paper over to the next farm by the Blue Canal, and Mr. A.A.A. will advise you about whatever it is you want to know. We don't want to know anything, objected the captain, pouting out his thick lips. We already know it. You have the paper. What more do you want? She asked him straight off, and she would say no more. Well, said the captain, reluctant to go. He stood as if waiting for something. He looked like a child staring at an empty Christmas tree. Well, he said again, come on, men. The four men stepped out into the hot, silent day. Half an hour later, Mr. A.A.A., seated in his library, sipping a bit of electric fire from a metal cup, heard the voices outside in the stone causeway. He leaned over the windowsill and gazed at the four uniformed men who squinted up at him. Are you Mr. A.A.A., they called. I am. Mr. T.T.T. sent us to see you, shouted the captain. Why did he do that? Asked Mr. A.A.A. Oops, hang on, sorry, just accidentally lost my place. There we go. Why did he do that? Asked Mr. A.A.A. He was busy? Well, that's a shame, said Mr. A.A.A. sarcastically. Does he think I have nothing else to do but entertain people he's too busy to bother with? That's not the important thing, sir, shouted the captain. Well, it is to me. I have much reading to do. Mr. T.T.T. is inconsiderate. This is not the first time he has been this thoughtless of me. Stop waving your hands, sir, until I finish. And pay attention. People usually listen to me when I talk. And you'll listen courteously, or I won't talk at all. Uneasily, the four men in the court shifted and opened their mouths, and once the captain, with veins on his face bulging, showed a few little tears in his eyes. Now, lectured Mr. A.A.A., do you think it fair of Mr. T.T.T. to be so ill-mannered? The four men gazed up through the heat. The captain said, We're from Earth. I think it very ungentlemanly of him, brooded Mr. A.A.A. A rocket ship. We came in it. Over there. Not the first time he's been unreasonable, you know. All the way from Earth. Why, for half a mind, I'd call him up and tell him off. Just the four of us, myself and these three men, my crew. I'll call him up. Yes, that's what I'll do. Earth, rocket, men, trip, space. Call him and give him a good lashing, cried Mr. A.A.A. He vanished like a puppet from a stage. For a minute, there were angry voices back and forth over some weird mechanism or other. Below, the captain and his crew glanced longingly back at their pretty rocket ship lying on the hillside, so sweet and lovely and fine. Mr. A.A.A. jerked up in the window, wildly triumphant. Challenged him to a duel. By the gods, a duel. Mr. A.A.A., the captain started all over again, quietly. I'll shoot him dead, do you hear? Mr. A.A.A., I'd like to tell you, we came 60 million miles. Mr. A.A.A. regarded the captain for the first time. Where'd you say you were from? The captain flashed a white smile. Aside to his men, he whispered, Now, we're getting someplace. To Mr. A.A.A. he called, We traveled 60 million miles from Earth. Mr. A.A.A. yawned. That's only 50 million miles this time of the year. He picked up a frightful-looking weapon. Well, I have to go now. Just take that silly note, though. I don't know what good it'll do you. And go over that hill into that little town of Yoper and tell Mr. I all about it. He's the man you want to see, not Mr. T.T.T. He's an idiot. I'm going to kill him. Not me, because you're not in my line of work. Line of work? Line of work, bleated the captain. Do you have to be in a certain line of work to welcome Earthmen? Don't be silly. Everyone knows that. Mr. AAA rushed downstairs. Goodbye. And down the causeway he raced like a pair of wild calipers. The four travelers stood shocked. Finally, the captain said, We'll find someone yet who will listen to us. Maybe we could go out and come in again, said one of the men in a dreary voice. Maybe we should take off and land again. Give them time to organize a party. That might be a good idea, murmured the time-tired captain. The little town was full of people drifting in and out of doors, saying hello to one another, wearing golden masks and blue masks and crimson masks for pleasant variety, masks with silver lips and bronze eyebrows, masks that smiled or masks that frowned according to the owner's disposition. The four men, wet from their long walk, paused and asked a little girl where Mr. I's house was. There. The child nodded her head. The captain got eagerly, carefully down on one knee, looking into her sweet young face. Little girl, I want to talk to you. He seated her on his knee and folded her small brown hands neatly in his own big ones, as if ready for a bedtime story which he was shaping in his mind, slowly and with a great patient happiness in details. Well, here's how it is, little girl. 6 months ago, another rocket came here to Mars. There was a man named York in it and his assistant. Whatever happened to them, we don't know. Maybe they crashed. They came in a rocket. So did we. You should see it, a big rocket. So we're the second expedition, following up the first. And we came all the way from Earth. The little girl disengaged one hand without thinking about it and clapped an expressionless golden mask over her face. Then she pulled forth a golden spider toy and dropped it to the ground while the captain talked on. The toy spider climbed back up to her knee obediently, while she speculated upon it coolly through the slits of her emotionless mask, and the captain shook her gently and urged his story upon her. We're Earthmen, he said. Do you believe me? Yes. The little girl peeped at the way she was wiggling her toes in the dust. Fine. The captain pinched her arm, a little bit with joviality, a little bit with meanness, to get her to look at him. We built our own rocket ship. Do you believe that? The little girl dug in her nose with a finger. Yes. And take your finger out of your nose, little girl. I am the captain, and never before in history has anybody come across space in a big rocket ship, recited the little creature, eyes shut. Wonderful. How did you know? Oh, telepathy. She wiped a casual finger on her knee. Well, aren't you just ever so excited? Cried the captain. Aren't you glad? You better just go see Mr. I right away. She dropped her toy to the ground. Mr. I will like talking to you. She ran off, with the toy spider scuttling obediently after her. The captain squatted there looking after her with his hand out. His eyes were watery in his head. He looked at his empty hands. His mouth hung open. The other three men stood with their shadows under them. They spat on the stone street. Mr. I answered his door. He was on his way to a lecture, but he had a minute if they would hurry inside and tell him what they desired. A little attention, said the captain, red-eyed and tired. We're from Earth. We have a rocket. There are 4 of us, crew and captain. We're exhausted. We're hungry. We'd like a place to sleep. We'd like someone to give us the key to the city or something like that, and we'd like somebody to shake our hands and say hooray and say, congratulations, old man. That about sums it up. Mr. I was a tall, vaporous, thin man with thick, blind blue crystals over his yellowish eyes. He bent over his desk and brooded upon some papers, glancing now and again with extreme penetration at his guests. Well, I haven't the forms here with me, I don't think. He rummaged through the desk drawers. Now, where did I put the forms? He mused. Somewhere. Oh, here we are. Now, he handed the papers over crisply. You'll have to sign these papers, of course. Do we have to go through all this rigmarole? Mr. I gave him a thick, glassy look. You say you're from Earth, don't you? Well, then there's nothing for it but you to sign. The captain wrote his name. Do you want my crew to sign also? Mr. I looked at the captain, looked at the three others, and burst into a shout of derision. Them! Sign! Ha! Ha! How marvelous! Them! Oh! Them! Sign! Tears sprang from his eyes. He slapped his knee and bent to let his laughter jerk out his gaping mouth. He held himself up with the desk. Them! Sign! The four men scowled. What's funny? Them! Sign! Sighed Mr. I, weak with hilarity. So very funny. Ha! I have to tell Mr. XXX about this. He examined the filled-out form, still laughing. Everything seems to be in order. He nodded. Even the agreement for euthanasia, if the final decision on such a step is necessary. He chuckled. Agreement for what? Don't talk. I have something for you. Here, take this key. The captain flushed. It's a great honor. Not the key to the city, you fool, snapped Mr. I. Just a key to the house. Go down that corridor, unlock the big door, and go inside, and shut the door tight. You can spend the night there. In the morning, I'll send Mr. XXX to see you. Dubiously, the captain took the key in hand. He stood looking at the floor. His men did not move. They seemed to be emptied of all their blood and their rocket fever. They were drained dry. What is it? What's wrong? Inquired Mr. I. What are you waiting for? What do you want? He came and peered up into the captain's face, stooping. Out with it, you! I don't... Suppose you could even... suggested the captain. I mean, that is, try to... Or think about... He hesitated. We've worked hard. We've come a long way, and maybe you could just shake our hands and say, well done? Do you think? His voice faded. Mr. I stuck out his hand stiffly. Congratulations. He smiled a cold smile. Congratulations. He turned away. I must go now. Use that key. Without noticing them again, as if they had melted down through the floor, Mr. I moved about the room, packing a little manuscript case with papers. He was in the room another 5 minutes, but never again addressed the solemn quartet that stood, with heads down, their heavy legs sagging, the light dwindling from their eyes. When Mr. I went out the door, he was busy looking at his fingernails. They straggled along the corridor in the dull, silent afternoon light. They came to a large burnished silver door, and the silver key opened it. They entered, shut the door, and turned. They were in a vast, sunlit hall. Men and women sat at tables and stood in conversing groups. At the sound of the door, they regarded the four uniformed men. One Martian stepped forward, bowing. I am Mr. Yu, he said, and I am Captain Jonathan Williams of New York City on Earth, said the captain without emphasis. Immediately, the hall exploded. The rafters trembled with shouts and cries. The people, rushing forward, waved and shrieked happily, knocking down tables. knocking down tables, swarming, rollicking, seizing the 4 Earthmen, lifting them swiftly to their shoulders. They charged about the hall 6 times, making a full and wonderful circuit of the room, jumping, bounding, singing. The Earthmen were so stunned that they rode the toppling shoulders for a full minute before they began to laugh and shout at each other. "Hey, this is more like it! This is the life! Boy, yeah! Woohoo!" They winked tremendously at each other. They flung up their hands to clap the air. "Hey! Hooray!" said the crowd. They set the Earthmen on a table. The shouting died. The captain almost broke into tears. "Thank you. It's good. It's good." "Tell us about yourselves," suggested Mr. U. The captain cleared his throat. The audience oh'd and ah'd as the captain talked. He introduced his crew. Each made a small speech and was embarrassed by the thunderous applause. Mr. U clapped the captain's shoulder. "It's good to see another man from Earth. I am from Earth also." How is that again?" "There are many of us here from Earth." "You? From Earth?" The captain stared. "But is that possible? Did you come by rocket? Has space travel been going on for centuries?" His voice was disappointed. What country are you from?" "Tuierol. I came by the spirit of my body years ago." "Tuierol." The captain mouthed the word. I don't know that country. What's this about spirit of body?" "And Miss RRR over there, she's from Earth too, aren't you, Miss RRR?" Miss RRR nodded and laughed strangely. "And so is Mrs. WWW, and Mr. QQQ, and Mr. VVV. "I'm from Jupiter," declared one man, preening himself. "I'm from Saturn," said another, eyes glinting slyly. "Jupiter? Saturn," murmured the captain, blinking. It was very quiet now. The people stood around and sat at the tables, which were strangely empty for banquet tables. Their yellow eyes were glowing, and there were dark shadows under their cheekbones. The captain noticed for the first time that there were no windows. The light seemed to permeate the walls. There was only one door. The captain winced. "This is confusing. Where on earth is this Tuierol? Is it near America?" "What is America?" You never heard of America? You say you're from Earth, and yet you don't know?" Mr. U drew himself up angrily. "Earth is a place of seas and nothing but seas. There is no land. I'm from Earth and know." "Wait a minute." The captain sat back. "You look like a regular Martian. Yellow eyes, brown skin." "Earth is a place of all jungle," said Miss RRR proudly. "I'm from Ori on Earth, a civilization built of silver." Now the captain turned his head from and then to Mr. U, and then to Mr. WWW, and Mr. ZZZ, and Mr. NNN, and Mr. HHH, and Mr. BBB. He saw their yellow eyes waxing and waning in the light, focusing and unfocusing. He began to shiver. Finally, he turned to his men and regarded them somberly. "Do you realize what this is?" "What, sir?" "This is no celebration," replied the captain tiredly. "This is no banquet. These aren't government representatives. This is no surprise party. Look at their eyes. Listen to them." Nobody breathed. There was only a soft white move of eyes in the close room. "Now I understand." The captain's voice was far away. "Why everyone gave us notes and passed us on one from the other until we met Mr. I, who sent us down a corridor with a key to open a door and shut a door. And here we are. Where are we, sir? The captain exhaled. In an insane asylum. It was night. The large hall lay quiet and dimly illuminated by hidden light sources in the transparent walls. The 4 Earthmen sat around a wooden table, their bleak heads bent over their whispers. On the floors, men and women lay huddled. There were little stirs in the dark corners, solitary men or women gesturing their hands. Every half hour, one of the captain's men would try the silver door and return to the table. Nothing doing, sir. We're locked in proper. They think we're really insane, sir? Quite. That's why there was no hullabaloo to welcome us. They merely tolerated what to them must be a constantly recurring psychotic condition. He gestured at the dark, sleeping shapes all about them. Paranoids, every single one. What a welcome they gave us. For a moment there, a little fire rose and died in his eyes. I thought we were getting our true reception. All the yelling and singing and speeches. Pretty nice, wasn't it? While it lasted. How long will they keep us here, sir? Until we prove we're not psychotics? Well, that should be easy. I hope so. You don't sound very certain, sir. I'm not. Look in that corner. A man squatted alone in the darkness. Out of his mouth issued a blue flame, which turned into the round shape of a small, naked woman. It flourished on the air softly in vapors of cobalt light, whispering and sighing. The captain nodded at another corner. A woman stood there, changing. First, she was embedded in a crystal pillar. Then she melted into a golden statue. Finally, a staff of polished cedar, and back to a woman. All through the midnight hall, people were juggling thin violet flames, shifting, changing, for nighttime was the time of change and affliction. Magicians, sorcerers, whispered one of the Earthmen. No, hallucination. They pass their insanity over into us so that we see their hallucinations too. Telepathy, auto-suggestion, and telepathy. Is that what worries you, sir? Yes. If hallucinations can appear this real to us, to anyone, if hallucinations are catching and almost believable, it's no wonder they mistook us for psychotics. If that man can produce little blue fire women and that woman there melt into a pillar, how natural if normal Martians think we produce our rocket ship with our minds. Oh, said his men in the shadows. Around them in the vast hall, flames leaped blue, flared, evaporated. Little demons of red sand ran between the teeth of sleeping women. Men became oily snakes. There was a smell of reptiles and animals. In the morning, everyone stood around looking fresh, happy, and normal. There were no flames or demons in the room. The captain and his men waited by the silver door, hoping it would open. Mr. XXX arrived after about 4 hours. They had a suspicion that he had waited outside the door, peering in at them for at least 3 hours before he stepped in, beckoned, and led them to his small office. He was a jovial, smiling man, if one could believe the mask he wore, for upon it was painted not one smile, but 3. Behind it, his voice was the voice of a not-so-smiling psychologist. What seems to be the trouble? You think we're insane, and we're not, said the captain. Contrarily, I do not think all of you are insane. The psychologist pointed a little wand at the captain. No, just you, sir. The others are secondary hallucinations. The captain slapped his knee. So that's it. That's why Mr. I laughed when I suggested my men sign the papers too. Yes, Mr. I told me. The psychologist laughed out of the carved, smiling mouth. A good joke. Where was I? Secondary hallucinations, yes. Women come to me with snakes crawling from their ears. When I cure them, the snakes vanish. We'll be glad to be cured. Go right ahead. Mr. XXX seemed surprised. Unusual. Not many people want to be cured. The cure is drastic, you know. Cure ahead. I'm confident you'll find we're all sane. Let me check your papers to be sure they're in order for a cure. He checked a file. Yes, you know such cases as yours need special cures. The people in that hall are simpler forms, but once you've gone this far, I must point out, with primary, secondary, auditory, olfactory, and labial hallucinations, as well as tactile and optical fantasies, it is pretty bad business. We have to resort to euthanasia. The captain leaped up with a roar. Look here, we've stood quite enough. Test us. Tap our knees, check our hearts, exercise us, ask questions. You're free to speak. The captain raved for an hour. The psychologist listened. Incredible, he mused. Most detailed dream fantasy I've ever heard. God damn it, we'll show you the rocket ship, screamed the captain. I'd like to see it. Can you manifest it in this room? Oh, certainly. It's in that file of yours, under R. Mr. XXX peered seriously into his file. He went and shut the file solemnly. Why did you tell me to look? The rocket isn't there. Of course not, you idiot. I was joking. Does an insane man joke? You find some odd senses of humor. Now, take me out to your rocket. I wish to see it. We're almost done with the story, by the way, so even if we run a little bit over, I'm just going to finish it up. It was noon. The day was very hot when they reached the rocket. So, the psychologist walked up to the ship and tapped it. It gonged softly. May I go inside? He asked slyly. You may. Mr. XXX stepped in and was gone for a long time. Of all the silly, exasperating things. The captain chewed a cigar as he waited. For 2 cents, I'd go back home and tell people not to bother with Mars. What a suspicious bunch of louts. I gather that a good number of their population are insane, sir. That seems to be their main reason for doubting. Nevertheless, this is all so damned irritating. The psychologist emerged from the ship after half an hour of prowling, tapping, listening, smelling, tasting. Now do you believe? Shouted the captain as if he were deaf. The psychologist shut his eyes and scratched his nose. This is the most incredible example of sensual hallucination and hypnotic suggestion I've ever encountered. I went through your rocket, as you call it. He tapped the hull. I hear it. Auditory fantasy. He drew a breath. I smell it. Olfactory hallucination induced by sensual telepathy. He kissed the ship. I taste it. Labial fantasy. He shook the captain's hand. May I congratulate you? You are a psychotic genius. You have done a most complete job. The task of protecting your psychotic image life into the mind of another via telepathy and keeping the hallucinations from becoming sensually weaker is almost impossible. Those people in the house usually concentrate on visuals, or, at the most, visuals and auditory fantasies combined. You have balanced the whole conglomeration. Your insanity is beautifully complete. My insanity? The captain was pale. Yes, what a lovely insanity. Metal, rubber, gravitizers, food, clothing, fuel, weapons, ladders, nuts, bolts, spoons. 10,000 separate items I checked on your vessel. Never have I seen such a complexity. There were even shadows under the bunks, and under everything. Such concentration of will. And everything, no matter how or when tested, had a smell, a solidity, a taste, a sound. Let me embrace you. He stood back at last. I'll write this into my greatest monograph. I'll speak of it at the Martian Academy next month. Look at you. Why, you even changed your eye color from yellow to blue, your skin to pink from brown, and those clothes and your hands having 5 fingers instead of 6. Biological metamorphosis through psychological imbalance. And your 3 friends. He took out a little gun. Incurable, of course. You poor, wonderful man. You will be happier dead. Have you any last words? Stop! For God's sake, don't shoot! You sad creature. I shall put you out of this misery which has driven you to imagine this rocket and these 3 men. It will be most engrossing to watch your friends and your rocket vanish once I have killed you. I will write a neat paper on the dissolvement of neurotic images from what I perceive here today. I'm from Earth. My name is Jonathan Williams, and these... Yes, I know, soothed Mr. XXX, and fired his gun. The captain fell with a bullet in his heart. The other 3 men screamed. Mr. XXX stared at them. You continue to exist? This is superb. Hallucinations with time and spatial persistence. He pointed the gun at them. Well, I'll scare you into dissolving. No, cried the 3 men. An auditory appeal, even with the patient dead, observed Mr. XXX as he shot the 3 men down. They lay on the sand, intact, not moving. He kicked them, then he rapped on the ship. It persists. They persist. He fired his gun again and again at the bodies. Then he stood back. The smiling mask dropped from his face. Slowly, the little psychologist's face changed. His jaw sagged. The gun dropped from his fingers. His eyes were dull and vacant. He put his hands up and turned in a blind circle. He fumbled at the bodies, saliva filling his mouth. Hallucinations, he mumbled frantically. Taste, sight, smell, sound, feeling. He waved his hands. His eyes bulged. His mouth began to give off a faint froth. Go away, he shouted at the bodies. Go away, he screamed at the ship. He examined his trembling hands. Contaminated, he whispered wildly. Carried over into me. Telepathy, hypnosis. Now I'm contaminated. Hallucinations in all their sensual forms. He stopped and searched around with his numb hands for the gun. Only one cure, only one way to make them go away. Vanish. A shot rang out. Mr. XXX fell. The 4 bodies lay in the sun. Mr. XXX lay where he fell. The rocket reclined on the little sunny hill and didn't vanish. When the town people found the rocket at sunset, they wondered what it was. Nobody knew, so it was sold to a junk man and hauled off to be broken up for scrap metal. That night, it rained all night. The next day was fair and warm. And that is the end of that story. And we're a few minutes over the top, but I won't worry about it too much. So I'm going to wrap it up quickly. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back as far as I know, barring anything crazy, next week for same reading times, same tad station. I hope you all take good care of yourselves, take good care of your loved ones, friends, and neighbors, anybody else who looks like they might need a kind word or a helping hand. I will return soon. Keep being good to yourselves. Be well and peace, and I'll talk to you very soon. Again, thanks for joining me. Bye.